Hey, welcome to Alchemy TV. Chris Ward here with AbundantYogi.com. Before the next 60 seconds is up, you're going to know exactly why you're watching this and what it will do for you. So here we go. You're here because you're a wellness professional, coach, or heart-centered entrepreneur, and you want to do what you love without burning out or selling out and still have your work fund your lifestyle of choice. I've created Alchemy TV to help you fulfill that desire, to take you behind the scenes with some of the bravest, clearest, most successful entrepreneurs on the planet who've made nothing short of magic happen in their life and career. These alchemists have three unmistakable things in common. Number one, they're creatively alive and deeply connected to their own heart, which connects them to the hearts of others. Number two, they are doing work that they love and making a huge impact. Number three, they are here to design a life, not just make a living. Today we'll reveal the latest highlights of their most important work and discoveries, plus what they've learned along their own path of lucrative self-realization and lifestyle design. The quest you and I have in common with them to do what we want, when we want, with whom we want, most of the time, while still offering our greatest contribution to the world. There's always a bit of alchemy underlying a quest like that, so that's what we're here to explore and tease apart together, so that you can grab some tips on how to practice alchemy in your own life and business in your flavor and style. Here we go. Hey there. Today I feel so privileged to be interviewing Susan Anderson. If there is one skill set that new and even seasoned entrepreneurs and lifestyle designers need to master, it's how to stop self-sabotaging their own success. Susan is the absolute best resource and the greatest expert that I have found, so knowledgeable on this subject. She is a psychotherapist who has devoted the past 30 years of clinical experience and research to helping people resolve their underlying abandonment wounds and overcome their outer child patterns of self-sabotage. Susan is the author of Taming Your Outer Child, Overcoming Your Self-Defeating Patterns. Also, Journey from Abandonment to Healing, Black Swan, 12 Lessons of Abandonment Recovery, and the workbook, Journey from Heartbreak to Connection. Her books are translated into German, Japanese, French, Spanish, Korean, and sold internationally. If you've heard me speak any time in the last few months even, you've likely heard me talk about Susan's work and what a difference it has made, not only in my own life, but with my clients and with their efforts to grow their businesses and design their lives. So I just couldn't be more honored and privileged and excited to have this opportunity to have Susan for this interview. So thank you, Susan, so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we are going to jump right in. I know we have a ton of ground to cover. To kick things off, what is outer child and how does it differ from inner child?
Well, inner child is about your feelings. It's an emotional presence within yourself. And the outer child acts out your inner child's feelings, usually inappropriately. It acts out especially your abandonment feelings. And it manifests it if you're trying to start a relationship. It can sabotage the relationship by acting out all of your insecurity, or it can sabotage your diet by sneaking cookies up to your bedroom. It's the self-sabotaging part that acts out your feelings.
And it sounds like it's attempting to do good. It means well.
It's well intended because it's sort of the primitive part of you that developed when you were a child, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10, and there was no adult presence within you yet. You hadn't developed that cognitive part as well.
Yeah.
So it's the part that just sort of takes over and says, I'm hungry, I'll eat. I'm uncomfortable, I'll take a nap. I don't feel like doing it, so I'll avoid it. I'll put it off till tomorrow. It's sort of the headstrong, take sort of a primitive solution to everything. And it's also the defense mechanisms.
Right.
Your inner child is feeling sad or overwhelmed or lost at home because of things going on in the family, and your outer child is busy defending you from feeling uncomfortable. But what happens is that although it's well intended, those defense mechanisms, when we get to adulthood, become maladaptive, and we want to get rid of those patterns.
Yeah, so when you and I first spoke about doing this interview, you said to me, Taming Your Outer Child is really more my mainstream book, but the core of the message here and the work that really needs addressing are the abandonment issues. So I'm curious, how do abandonment issues lead to outer child patterns of self-sabotage?
Well, we all have abandonment issues because abandonment fear is primal. And if we're human, we have abandonment fear. Even other mammals have it.
Hmm.
But all humans have it. It doesn't take a traumatic history to have a fear of abandonment. And outer child was born within us to defend us against that fear. So, when we went to first grade and we were afraid that our mommy would never pick us up, or it just felt uncomfortable to be separated, it's the outer child that developed the attitude or tried to cry and get attention, to manipulate it so that mommy would come back maybe, or to act out toward other students. It's the outer child that kicks in. So outer child really is born with the intention of calming and soothing our abandonment fears, which is primal to everyone.
But your book talks about how outer child is not the best person, not the best part of our personality for this job,
Now,
of soothing in the inner
when
child. Is that right?
then we can take over command and we can meet our inner child's needs directly and not leave it up to that sort of 10-year-old within. Think of your outer child as the annoying older brother or sister who tries to meddle and makes things worse.
Yeah.
And so when we become adults and we have a cognitive mind, that's when we can say, look, outer, thanks a lot. I know that my inner child was feeling insecure, but it wasn't great to scream at your new boyfriend or whatever. Let me take charge from here. The only thing is that the adult self has to get strong enough to take command away from the outer child. And that's a big challenge.
I know from your book, which I have right here, Taming Your Outer Child, and I just, right before the interview, because I had about a gazillion sticky notes hanging off of every page, I pulled them out so it would look a little neater, but it's definitely gotten some wear and tear. I know from the book that one of the best ways to strengthen adult self is to be very aware of my outer child patterns, in particular, some of its favorite ways of showing up. So from your experience with all the people that you've worked on and all the workshops that you've facilitated, what are the most common outer child patterns?
Well, procrastination is huge, avoidance, because outer child seeks immediate gratification because it's developmentally only about 8, 9, 10,
Right.
maybe a little younger, a little older. But it likes immediate gratification, and to avoid dealing with a conflict is to, coast for a while.
Yeah.
So its primary defense mechanism is avoidance and procrastination. Just put it off, don't do it, don't handle it. The garage needs cleaning out, just continue sitting on the sofa and watching the game. But the way that it manifests that really causes the most amount of pain that I hear the most about is the way it sabotages relationships, because inner child can be feeling sensitive to rejection, can feel very easily slighted, can be looking for approval and acceptance, can be looking to feel wanted and loved by a romantic partner. And outer child can sabotage our efforts to get people to want us and love us and feel comfortable with us by acting out those feelings inappropriately. And I call that behavior, a lot of that behavior, abandoholism, because outer child is addicted to going through the drama of abandonment over and over again so it can enact new dramas with new people, and it keeps going through those abandonment cycles. And if you're an abandaholic, it means that you tend to be attracted only to the unavailable.
Mm.
And if somebody is available, you don't feel very much chemistry, so you think it's not the right person, and you might even feel bored if somebody's available. But if the person is not available emotionally, or sort of available but keeps pulling away and distancing, Then your pursuit mode comes in, and outer child loves that because it's like a game, it's
Yes.
being on the playground. It's scruffy and it loves to pursue.
Yes.
So, abandoholism, the pursuit of the unavailable and the inability to be attracted to the available, is one of the big bugaboos, in people's lives, because it even ruins marriages because you get, happy and secure with your partner and you kind of lose passion, and it interferes even in long-term relationships.
So I wonder, how does the abandoholism play into why we go about the entertaining and indulging in the if only type visioning
Yeah.
versus the opportunities that are more realistic, more grounded, and more accessible and available to us?
Well, it's the adult is the part that is able to think realistically. The adult self, the cognitive mind, and it's not the strongest part of us by nature. I just did a workshop, and I would say half of the people, or almost half, started saying that they realize as a result of working with the outer child concept that they're all outer child, that they haven't found their adult self yet, that their
Yeah.
outer child has been running the show,
Yeah.
and they've just been driven by outer child behaviors. So outer child really just takes off and runs with it, and it's very hard to have that adult self say, look, this is not realistic to pursue these unavailable people.
Yes.
You are looking to get self-esteem by proxy and choosing people out of range or something of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
You, speaking from self to self, you self need to become attracted to people who are realistic. But that's your adult self, which may be of all the parts of your personality, inner child, outer child, and the adult self. The adult self may be the weakest of all three. And that's where the solution is to strengthen that adult self.
So, in a moment, we'll go into more detail about how to go about strengthening the adult self. But speaking more directly to the outer child patterns, why are they so hard to break? I know your book talks a bit about how there are neurobiological reasons for this. What are those?
Well, I don't want to sound discouraging to folks out there because they're very, very hard to break, but there are tools that break them. But they're really embedded in the brain, because as we learn a pattern that helps to assuage the emotions, the separation anxiety that comes from all of that unresolved abandonment fear, as we learn patterns, even if they're maladaptive, when we get older, they help to somehow soothe the feelings, or they scratch the itch, even though they result in even worse pain. They're such self-defeating patterns, but they're deeply ingrained. They're deeply embedded right into the brain. And the brain in this regard is being studied. So a month from now, there'll be even more information because this is a burgeoning new field. But the basal ganglia are known to be a seat of developing behaviors that are automatic, that after you've learned the behavior, you don't even have to think about it. So the behaviors are going out without any adult self being present to decide them.
Right.
They're just sort of the default mode because they're deeply ingrained in the brain. That's not to say that they're not changeable, because we can strengthen the adult self and overcome them, but it does take work.
Yeah, and I love that about speaking to you, and I love that about the book, that it really makes it very clear that if you're not willing to do the work and go through these practices and utilize these tools and do the dialogues between these often conflicting parts of the self, inner child, outer child, and adult self, then just reading the book isn't going to do a whole lot for you.
No, you have to actually work it, because you have to do your way out of these problems. You can't think your way out of them or talk your way out of them. You have to do your way out of them.
So can you give us a few really helpful tips about how we go about strengthening adult self and resolving our self-defeating behaviors and the abandonment wounds that trigger those behaviors?
Well, the techniques all involve working on that abandonment wound. The abandonment wound is universal. Some of us have a more tender wound, maybe a larger wound than others, depending on our history and our temperament. But the abandonment wound is the center of the self. We really feel our center when it's aching. That's when we feel it most. It's the yogic center. When we're real happy, we can get into the moment and do visualization and do meditation, and it's kind of easy because we're not anxious, so it's easy to concentrate. But when we're in pain, that's when it's hardest to do those exercises, but it's also when we're most in touch with that center. Mm-hmm. So having a wound is not a bad thing because it is a place to tune in, and that wound becomes the seat of the healing. So when we go in to work on changing the behaviors, we have to get right into that abandonment, the unresolved abandonment stuff, and work toward all abandonment is self-abandonment. It's all self-abandonment. So there are exercises that actually allow you to reverse the self-abandonment by adopting yourself. And there's an exercise that facilitates it. That's one tool. Mm-hmm. And then another tool involves visualization. Because in order to come out of these patterns, you have to be able to picture yourself doing differently. Right. You have to be able to visualize yourself with your problems behind you, and you have to be able to see yourself solving them in a doing way. You have to see yourself behaving differently. So you have to first visualize it and see it. And you also have to have focus. So the visualization is a focus. It actually puts on the screen of your mind an image of your goals and how you are achieving them and how they will look when they're achieved. And that visualization has a profound effect on your behavior.
Yeah, it seems like it's fuel for the adult self to get stronger, for the muscles of the adult self to be strengthened when the outer child muscles have been so dominant. It seems that the coupling a lot of the separation therapy that you talk about, the dialogue where you give little or inner child a voice and you create more of a bonding between adult self and inner child so that outer doesn't have to be the parent. Exactly. It seems like coupling that with the visioning techniques seems to be the way to go, that you kind of have to do them both.
Yes. It all involves imagination. When it comes to abandonment recovery of self-sabotage, imagination is your higher power. So you need your imagination to envision that you have an inner child, an adult self, and an outer child. You need the imagination to create the dialogue. You're using your imagination the whole time because these are sort of figments of our imagination, right, in a sense, but they become very real. Yeah. When you're using your sense of future to envision your problems already behind you, I call it back to the future. But when you use your imagination for that, you're giving your brain a stretch because certain parts of the brain are used in using your imagination. Right. That exercises parts of the brain. And when you're combining it with emotional progress and you're in touch with your emotions at that time, you're combining different parts of your brain. You're integrating those parts. Many sections of your brain are being used at the same time. And the instrument writing it is the imagination. It's being driven by the power source of your imagination. So it's a very important part of the self, imagination, and it's the greatest strengthening tool for an adult self.
Yeah, I've experienced firsthand how it you use the term physical therapy for the brain, and it absolutely feels like that. It's stretching us in new ways to tease apart the old ways that have been so habitual that we haven't even been awake to. And it really creates that, or requires that deliberateness to be awake to them and aware of them and to choose a different way consciously.
Right. Yes.
So if outer child, inner child, and the adult self are personifications that help us conceptualize the psyche, why would personifying these parts and using our imagination to get them to talk to each other, how exactly is that helping people to change?
Well, in visualizing these parts, we are actually creating sort of almost a therapeutic multiple personality disorder. And then once we have that and we create a dialogue between at least two of those parts at a time, or three if you can get really fancy, but once you have them visualized and you have them sort of working, you're actually performing separation therapy. You're doing with yourself a kind of really deep psychoanalytic, psychodynamic psychotherapy, except it's faster because it gets into such deep corners of the self. It becomes so real because you're using your imagination, you're creating a personification. The parts you're creating they're abstractions.
Yes.
But they become so real because they embody the feelings and the cognitive thinking. They're teasing those parts apart. And then you have this concept of outside of the self, outside, that allows you to blame this sabotage on this sort of external presence that's sabotaging you. And that allows you to love the inner child unconditionally.
To see clearly what's going on and that it is us, but to have compassion for it. That's what I've noticed. Complete
compassion, because outer child's been out there like a kid who needs a parent, who can't wait for you to put your arm around its shoulder and say, let me take charge. Let me send you out to ride bicycles because you need exercise. But I'll take care of, your inner child's needs.
Yes.
And the beauty of it is that the person direct dialogue is the adult self, and that strengthens the adult muscle incrementally. Now, you can't just do it once and have a strong muscle, just as physical therapy or exercise. It has to happen over a period of time. But it eventually, you can really see a difference. And even before you see the difference, changes start to happen.
Amen. I've definitely noticed this, and I've noticed this with my clients, especially in doing the dialogue between adult self and little or inner child. It's amazing how much little has to say.
Amazing.
Incredible. Yes. And it really brings a lot of clarity as to why the sabotage has been happening and what she feels unfulfilled about, what she's angry for, and how to go about getting that need met in a more direct way versus sabotaging things as a very horribly misguided way of getting that need met.
Yes. For instance, if you go through a breakup and you try to come out of it, and you try to just lift up above it and find a new partner, numbing occurs in the area of the abandonment wound because it's scar tissue there, and numbing occurs. And now you can't feel as well. You can only feel insecurity and pain. So what does outer child do? Outer child says, I'll find you an unavailable person who might leave you and might be inconsistent and might break your heart. That you can feel. So outer sabotages your love life by now pursuing people who can make you feel something which you confuse as love,
right?
Which is insecurity.
So even though it might not feel great, it's better than the numbness.
It's better than nothing at all. And your brain has come to confuse insecurity with love. So now you think if somebody makes you insecure enough, oh, they're great, you've got to have them.
Crazy.
It's a very prevalent pattern. It's out there. There's so much of that creating loneliness and disconnection.
Yeah, I can get a real sense of that. We do unfortunately have to wrap up. It's been such a treat to have you here, and I'm so excited to have you as a guest teacher on our Taming Your Self-Saboteur call pretty shortly here in the next couple of weeks. I love to wrap up with 2 questions on each of these Alchemy interviews. So we'll do that quickly. And then we'll give our viewers more information about how to get your book and where to find more on Susan Anderson. So 2 quick questions. What do you feel is the single most important mindset to employ if we really want to design a life versus just make a living?
Focus. You have to be able to envision what you're looking for. Even if you leave it kind of open because you're still learning what you're looking for, you have to envision yourself being fulfilled by what you do. And then you have to be determined. Nothing happens completely by magic.
Yes. Amen.
A little bit by luck, but we have to take action. But with focus, that sharpens the pencil. And that pencil, that's what we write new life with.
Beautiful. I love that. And what are you working on now? Any new developments, projects, offerings that you want to share?
I'm right now updating the research for Journey from Abandonment to Healing, which is more or less the textbook on abandonment. And the research will also be embedded into the workbook. There have been some new findings that are significant enough to bring it up to date. So there will be a 2013 edition, or no, I should say 2014 edition of Journey from Abandonment to Healing coming out with Berkeley of Putnam, Penguin Putnam.
And that's the workbook?
Summer. It'll be the textbook, but the workbook will reflect that.
Okay.
It will also be into the workbook.
Awesome. I'm so excited for that. Yeah. That's going to be so powerful.
Yes.
Well, it has been such a pleasure, such a treat to have you here. You have such a wealth of knowledge in this subject, in this arena, and I personally don't find another arena more inspiring and more helpful, because every single one of us is wired with some degree of these self-sabotage patterns. So it's so important. It's been business changing, life changing for me to have this tool of being able to tease it apart and separate it and console it and heal it and address it in an adult way.
Yes, that's the key.
It's been so huge. I mean, I even personally myself haven't had an effective enough tool for this until now. So from the bottom of my heart, Susan, thank you so much for that.
It's my pleasure.
Such a gift. Your website is tamingyourouterchild.com. Is that right?
Yes, and it's also abandonment.net, or you could also just think of it as outerchild.net.
Okay.
The websites are a net that captures anybody with outer child behaviors. That's 100% of us. And anyone with abandonment issues. That's 100% of us.
That's right. Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, Susan. It's been such a pleasure, and I look forward again having you on our as a guest speaker for our Taming Your Self-Saboteur call here in the next couple of weeks.
I'll be there.
All righty. Thank you so much.
Thank you.